Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, Teaching International Relations in 2025, a global panel discussion. My name is Amanda Rosen. I am the chair of the Pedagogy Conference Planning Committee, and we are sponsoring this event. And I want to just start by expressing my gratitude to the committee, in particular, Shampa Biswas, whose idea this was, and Ajay Parasam, who was our original moderator, but unfortunately had to step down due to union activity at his institution. But I'm really grateful to the panelists listed here and to our moderator, James Pigeon Fielder, who is going to help run this panel. Before we get started, I just want to announce another upcoming event sponsored by the committee. And that is the Teaching Day at ISA. I know many of you may have joined us last year at the first Teaching Day. I'm thrilled to announce we will be doing the Teaching Day at ISA again this year for those who are attending in person in Columbus, Ohio. I realize many of us are not able to do that for a variety of reasons. We will be sharing the resources presented at this event on the ISA website, and we do hope to offer more virtual events in the future. But for those of you who will be attending in Columbus, this is a free mini conference within a conference event. And as you can see, the sessions listed here, we've got some really, really great panelists. None of these sessions are going to be focused on offering scholarship of teaching and learning. Those are being left to the main conference. Instead, these are all going to be demonstrations and sharing of different kinds of teaching activities. So we hope everyone will walk away with some practical things that they can do in their own classrooms. But with that, I'm really excited to turn things over to Pigeon so that you can hear from our amazing panelists. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say.
Rock on. Very happy to be here from my roost in Fort Collins, Colorado. Again, I'm James Pigeon Fielder. I'll explain pigeon over a beer at ISA in March, if you ask politely. And I think I'm going to actually remain in the background here. I'm going to put on the dark outfit and actually give the majority of the time to the panelists. I do have some prepared questions, but in a pre-brief before this panel started, I said, as they give their opening remarks, I'm actually going to do some live recording of a few of the remarks and leverage those remarks first. We'll also have ample time, or we should have ample time to take questions from the audience. If you post in the chat, I will also be tracking the chat as well. And I am going to go in the order as presented on the slide. First, we have Alia Alves from the Federal University of Paraíba, Brazil.
Good afternoon, everyone that is on this side of the world. And I mean, hello for all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank for this opportunity. Thanks, Amanda, for putting everybody together and bringing us to discuss such important topics. So my name is Elia. I'm originally from the region of São Paulo, Brazil, but I have been here in the northeast area of Brazil. It has been already, I think, 15 years maybe. And I teach at the International Relations Department for undergrad and also at the postgrad program of Political Science and International Relations. So, people ask us to reflect on some contemporary questions of teaching globally. So I think I should bring here maybe some concerns of teaching the global South. So maybe that's why I'm here. And I think one of the main concerns that we have been discussing, and some colleagues and we have been discussing since we also started this discussion at the Teaching Day this year, is the impact of AI in teaching. So I think this is a major concern that we have been facing today since 2022. And we did a survey with some colleagues here in Brazil, and it was very impressive, some results we got, because few of us feel that our students' work, they got better. Usually they got worse. And when you talk informally to people, many people, they just don't know how to deal with it, you know. So I think this is a really big issue that actually maybe is not the most important one, but I think we feel that there is a difference between undergrad students and grad students, especially when it comes to the mind reading and not reading, actually, and how we can manage all these challenges we have as professors to teach um, those changes in the political order and the political world if your student doesn't read, you know. So I think this is a major concern and challenge that we have, especially for undergrads. So this is, I think, my major research agenda when it comes to teaching. And if you know what I'm trying to do nowadays in my classes, and actually we learned this with James. I'm not sure whether he reminds it, but I'm trying to do small simulations in some classes, in some courses. So I think this is kind of working. I noticed that students are really, they really want to engage on it when we bring something together, something different, which is more applied, and students enjoy it. I will also start to try field classes that I have been a lot involved in field classes with my colleague, André Steiner, uh, which teaches here in Pernambuco, but now I'm trying myself. So this is a major challenge to bring field classes to international relations students in the Global South. They usually are not used to it. So we are trying to do it despite many challenges we have it. So I think putting everything together, I think teaching nowadays, with all the challenges we have, is like having attention in a way and engaging your students in a way that they feel connected to what you are being discussed. So this is a really good experience. We are trying to put more racial contents in our curriculum. We have been doing this as a department in many different strategies. And for the first time, maybe in 4 or 3 years that I've been doing it in some subjects I teach, I noticed that students start to become really engaged with this discussion. You know, when we bring Africa to the floor, when we bring in a positive way. So I think this is a major challenge because we are not trained on those contents. So we have always to be, you know, updating our knowledge. But at the same time, I think those kind of cases, you know, developing new cases. So some colleagues and I, we are always trying to develop some teaching notes. So you can put together some tips for other colleagues. They could do it easier, some exercises and small simulations in classes. So I think there are some contributions that we have been doing here, and I will be really excited. I am really excited to listen to all my colleagues. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And preview, spoiler, she actually highlighted one of the questions I was going to ask. So good times. And so next we have Devin Cantwell Chavez from the University of Copenhagen.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm over here on the dark side of the globe right now. Very happy to be here with you all today. I want to just give a bit of background because I think I have a slightly less conventional pathway into teaching in political science and IR. And this has also shaped a little bit some of the reflections that I'm going to share with you today. So I actually got my start career-wise professionally in the world of K-12 education. So I used to be a high school science, computer science, and mathematics teacher. And I also have spent the last several years doing instructional coaching for folks that are going into their first year in the classroom. So I've had a lot of opportunity over the last 13 years to think about kind of pedagogy in general and kind of why we do what we do in the classroom. On the same side of this, so I just wrapped up my PhD. I'm what would be considered in the world of IR and political science to be an early career instructor. And so I'm caught a little bit between these kind of two worlds here. And I'm also caught between a few types of training and cultural traditions. So I'm primarily trained in American academia and kind of American IR, training programs. But I did my PhD and have teaching experience in Canada as well. And now I'm teaching in Denmark. And all of these things, as well as the adult facilitation learning or adult learning facilitation that I've done outside of political science, all of these worlds of teaching are vastly different. And the literature for IR that all of these countries draw from are very different. So I think, I think this background is really helpful to, I guess, frame a bit of what I'm about to say. So we were asked to reflect on a couple of questions here. The first being, what parts of the IR curriculum are enduring, what require radical revision. In terms of the enduring piece of this, so I just wrapped up a project with a team of other early career researchers where we were focusing on perspectives of other early career researchers in global environmental politics. And one interesting aspect that kept showing up, because global environmental politics is, while there are a lot of IR people in it, it also draws kind of from interdisciplinary fields. A lot of the appreciation that folks shared when we talked to them in focus groups or in surveys was an appreciation that IR provides this kind of theoretical grounding and a really rich canon of theory in order to help explain what we kind of observe around global environmental politics. But this is a bit of a double-edged sword because the way that I think we have traditionally approached IR, at least from the American Academy, and I think this becomes looser in other regional contexts or global contexts, is that I think typically, especially from the American Academy piece of this, we tend to take a very kind of political science approach where things are these theories can sometimes be taught and discussed in ways that are very prescriptive instead of as an approach or a lens in which we can understand the world or understand contemporary challenges. So I think while the theory piece of this is something that's quite enduring, we need to revise the ways that we are actually leveraging these theories in classrooms and helping students make sense of the world around them. Now, this leads into the radical revision pieces of this. So first, I'll say is, in the next couple of years here, I'm going to tip the scales from, more time in non-American academia than American academia. And I'll say that I think there's a great benefit to de-Americanizing the teaching of IR. I have taken classes with a lot of folks who take very, probably less traditional approaches to the American IR canon. But even with that, those perspectives can be quite limited. And even when they kind of expand beyond the kind of traditional canon of IR, oftentimes those extensions are maybe into, European scholars or European perspectives of things, but very rarely are including Indigenous perspectives, are very rarely including Global South perspectives, are very rarely including, like issues of like understanding power and history as it relates to IR as well. And so I think a de-Americanizing of the teaching of IR is something that we need to approach. And I want to be careful about this because I know we have a lot of American IR folks here, but I also know we have a lot of people who don't teach that way. So I guess I would encourage that this message is particularly for our American folks in the room here. I would also say we're exploring an interesting concept right now in another paper about it's actually kind of problematizing the way that we sometimes do simulations. And I need to give credit to Kara Hooser here, who has really planted this like nugget of something that just keeps like jabbing at me, especially as I'm working on my security studies syllabi this week, which is IR has a tendency to really focus on violence. And we have, and there's something there that I think we need to have kind of some deeper conversations and criticisms about. And I think this also relates to the last point here, which is like globalizing the canon. So including more Indigenous scholars, more Global South scholars, and not just as like a week on your syllabus, not just as like a reading, but actually kind of centering some of these approaches here and putting them into real conversation with what we'd consider to be the kind of more traditional canon. Which brings into some kind of closing thoughts here about classroom pedagogies. So in this particular moment, so Aaliyah's point about AI, I think is very important. I think it's showing up in a lot of conversations. I would also say that I think one of the kind of antidotes to this is really engaging in a relational form of pedagogy in our classrooms. What does that mean, right? So I think that means a few things. So thinking about issues about accessibility. So what are the kind of things that are trading off in students' lives that are making these types of technologies and making disengagement in our classroom more tempting for them? And very seriously considering this. Thinking about trauma-informed pedagogy. And also thinking about the use of tools like reflections. So actually having students regularly considering why are we doing what we're doing and how is our thinking developing? I'm sure there are a lot of folks that are also going to bring up, kind of these applied aspects of pedagogy and learning, such as simulations. I also would say I found a lot of success in bringing in kind of contemporary and local applications to students. So I've spent the last few weeks trying to kind of understand how some of these security studies topics relate specifically to a Danish context, which is very new to me, and trying to understand what that perspective means. So I think these local applications oftentimes can be helpful. And then I'll finally say that I think creative approaches to pedagogy can be quite helpful. And what I mean by this is allowing students to actually draw on some of their own funds of knowledge. So I have a assignment that I've used called Anything But a Paper that I've cribbed from Hakeem Jefferson. And I had everything from beaded belts to plays to documentaries that are probably like one step below like getting submitted to a film festival type of quality. I also, I had some students that phoned in the assignment, but I'd say, 3/4 of my students really appreciated the opportunity to do something creative, and that wasn't just another paper for their classes. And on the flip side of this, I think there's more that we can do to help students think through things. One of the favorite lessons that students told me about, I do like a syllabus annotation activity at the end of the semester. A lot of my students commented on two particular activities we did. We analyzed poetry that came out of a special issue when we were talking about Indigenous governance. And when we talked about borders, we did a gallery walk activity where we actually analyzed, I think it was like 15 different images of different border like contexts, and had students kind of comment about similarities, differences, ties to like their readings from that week. And students really appreciated getting to engage with something and think through these concepts in a medium that wasn't just an academic article. So I'll leave you with that. Yeah, thank you for having me here and excited for this conversation.
Sweet. And another spoiler, Devin had another question I was going to ask. Making my job easy. All right. So next we have Janneke Koeman from Willamette University.
Hello, I'm Janneke. I'm in Portland, Oregon, in a basement. I'm glad to be with you all today. Thank you, Amanda and Pigeon, for organizing, Hannah and Lauren. Shout out to AJ, who's holding it down on a picket. And thanks to all the panelists. It's really nice to be here with you. I just started teaching yesterday, so it's actually like one of those rare times where you get to debrief and reflect in the middle of the work, and I'm super resonating with what Devin said just now. So just for the international context, I teach at what is known as a liberal arts college in America, and those are like really small universities with like trees and quads that you see in films where like teachers wear tweed and you sort of have students over to their house for dinner. That's what I thought I was getting into anyway. Turns out it's a really underfunded liberal arts college, and we're always like trying to scrape things together and support our students and maintain a curriculum and be responsive to people's needs. Not quite like the movies that I saw before I took this job. I'm not American, obviously. I I'm from the UK, had no idea what I was getting into. My university, I describe it as a predominantly white institution. That is an acronym we've started using in the US to describe like the universities that feel extremely white in all kinds of ways, not just demographically, but culturally as well. The students in my program do not reflect those demographics in general. I teach in a sociology program. I've noticed a lot of IR people have gradually moved to sociology. I'm one of them for all kinds of complicated reasons. I'm in chair of sociology department. And that means that I sort of present my teaching. I don't have to. I used to do these presentations about how to teach all the paradigms, but like against the grain. But I don't have to do any of that now because I'm in sociology and no one could care less. So I teach a class called Can Activists Change the World for incoming students? And it's really about structure and agency and transnational coalitions, but we call it Can Activists Change the World? Because, you know, we want to make it accessible. And then I teach classes like, really, they let me do whatever I want at Liberal Arts College. So I call them Pan-African Revolutions, Transnational Feminism, all kinds of classes. Oh, education, power, resistance, and research classes. So I'm really lucky. I know this is going to be on YouTube later, but let's just face it, this is not going to last. So let's do what we can while we can. That's my approach right now. I might come to regret that later, but that's what I'm going with. I was so gutted with IR pedagogy growing up. My teachers were great, but I came to IR as a first generation traditional college student, you know, first one in my family to do the whole university thing. I really thought IR would give me some insight into oppression and resistance. You know, I thought my parents had been in the peace movement, the anti-apartheid movement, you know, based in the UK, but like, you know, in international solidarity movements. And I just thought IR might offer me something to like go deeper. And that, you know, in the 90s in IR, I think people always get offended when I say this, but I think you can all guess that just wasn't on the cards. You had to really do the work yourself to read against the reading list. I found a lot of, you know, I think like a lot of nerds here, I found a lot of inspiration by reading about why I hated IR so much. I'm probably not employable after that, but that really animated me. But I think what also animated me was as I moved to the US for a scholarship as a grad student, learning about the labor movement and the sort of political education in the labor movement. And I thought, here's something that is studying the world in order to change it collectively, in coalition, intergenerationally. And I became involved in student movements, labor movements, and I was like, I really believe that we have a lot to learn from these pedagogies. These days, I also teach in a maximum security prison. I teach in a college town that is also one of those prison towns, you know, the type in the US. I do not work for the prison. So I work for a group of people called the Lifers Unlimited Club. And I do transformative justice courses with them as well. So I'll end on this. I'll try to end on this. I recently had to fill out a plan for my teaching for the next 2 to 5 years. And I was like, dudes, like, do you have a plan? Because I don't know what your plan is. So, but I had to come up with this plan. And I do like having a plan. So I came up with 2 things. I feel like young people aren't treated with dignity, like as individuals, collectively. And I want to do everything I can in these spaces. I know classrooms aren't safe spaces, but I want to do everything I can to kind of put a spirit of dignity back into these interactions, these relationships, as much as I can. I want to infuse them with dignity. I want to start by earning their trust, not telling them what they have to do to earn my trust. Like Devin said, I want students to know that they have knowledge and experiences that can be translated into knowledge, and that they have a valuable voice. Honestly, all I can say about AI is deaf to Nazi deaf robots. That's what I tell them. But really, all I say about AI is I want you to have a voice. I want you to have a messy, loud, personal voice that isn't BS, grammarly slush. And usually students want that too. And then finally, like my classes are all about oppression, but I want all that study of oppression to be about the long histories and futures of resistance. So that's all.
Rock on.
Thank you.
And in Yannicka's case, wait for the pigeon pun, your comments dovetailed into 3 different questions I had. So again, this is gonna be great, glorious. And I love also Nancy Wright's question in the chat, which I'm definitely putting together for later. Now for the next 2, I'm introducing 2 professors at the same time as they're presenting as a team from the same university. Certainly during the Q&A portion, they'll be addressing questions separately. But for now, the dynamic duo of Kate Schick and Claire Timperley, both from Victoria University of Wellington.
Kia ora. Well, thank you so much for having us. We actually have prepared a few comments in part because we're working together, but just a little bit of institutional background. So yeah, we're at Te Herenga Waka, which is Victoria University of Wellington. It is quite early in the morning here. Our university is one of 8 publicly funded universities in New Zealand. We don't have private universities in New Zealand. And it has a pretty diverse student body. Anyone in New Zealand can go to university after, I think it's the age of 20, maybe 21, regardless of how they did at high school. So we have, a really big range in students. We're working in a colonial context. So there's a lot of kind of movements in relation to that. Our current government is also creating some kind of conditions, both thinking about kind of the colonial context that are quite challenging, but also in terms of they're really pushing for education to be connected to economic growth. So that really has been a context that we've been working in for a while, but feels particularly acute right now. Both Kate and I are permanent staff members, which means effectively we're tenured. So we're very aware of all of our work in pedagogy. We're aware of the particular privileges that we bring to our teaching. We've sort of split the presentation, so I'll kind of kick off a little bit with we have been working together on pedagogy for almost a decade now. We really see pedagogy as kind of essential to our life and our work, and really want to draw attention to its importance within the study of global politics. So thank you so much, Amanda, for bringing us into this panel and for creating a lot of community around pedagogy and international relations. We really wanted to speak, and also just thank you so much to the other panelists. I see so many resonances across our approach that you'll hopefully see as we talk a little bit more about some of the things we're doing. But I think a lot of what we're doing is kind of responsive to kind of some of the challenges of AI in teaching, like Aaliyah brought up, Devin, really a lot of resonances related to kind of that central importance of relationship and reflection. And then Yannicka, I just love, reading against the canon, but I even kind of wrote out a little, I love that, asking students to have a messy, loud voice and really thinking about kind of centering them and their experiences in our teaching. So you'll see that in some of what we want to share today. There were 3 aspects of our pedagogy that we wanted to talk about. The first is slowness as subversion. The second is spacious classroom learning. And the third is assessment as pedagogy. And that sounds like a lot, but I promise we won't take more than our 10-minute allocation. So with regard to slowness as subversion, we've been locating our pedagogy within a broader context of hypercapitalism, where institutions increasingly frame students as consumers, relying on quantifiable metrics to evaluate teaching and its outputs. This student as consumer mentality is aligned with the banking model of education, where educators feel pressured to deliver content to students, which draw on Enlightenment principles of decontextualized rationality and universality. In the context of unprecedented crises in which we find ourselves, we explore the concept of slow pedagogies as subversive practices that disrupt dominant conceptions of time and make space for alternative, embodied, situated, relational, and careful ways of knowing and being. Instead of conforming to this notion of progress that reify and uphold capitalist, colonial, and patriarchal systems of domination and oppression, slow pedagogy privileges quality, attentiveness, and care. In making space for a deeper and slower cultivation of knowledge, we center learners holistically as whole persons, body, mind, and spirit, and as always in relation, not just to each other, but also to the land on which they reside and the histories and socioeconomic structures that shape their past and present. So we're really seeking to subvert the neoliberal subjectivity that structures the academy. And this is the ethos that underlies our approach to pedagogy and informs how we design our courses, prepare assessment, and approach our students. Kate.
Kia ora tātou, and yeah, just some lovely resonances here, and lovely to be with you all. So one way that we've conceptualized our approach in the classroom is to practice what we've called spacious learning. And what we mean by spacious learning is kind of to invite students into slower spaces that center being rather than rushing to do or to produce. So very much kind of that relational centered approach. This approach treats learning as a process rather than a means to an end, allowing students time to sit with their ideas and to relate them to their own lives and experiences. So we're really trying to encourage people to draw on that lived curriculum of their own lives and worlds. So I'm just going to very briefly share 3 practices that exemplify this practice, so ways that we outwork this in the classroom. One way is that we create micro-community of learning. So small groups of approximately 6 to 8 students that function as learning communities over the course of a semester. Students reflect, they brainstorm, they present, they peer review, it sort of becomes their home base for the course, and they develop these quite lovely relationships through that time. So although we as educators are present and engaged, this micro-community structure enables students to inhabit their own space within the classroom and to develop a really strong sense of belonging with their co-learners. What I've found as I've done this is that students come to trust each other. They become increasingly willing to be vulnerable with one another, to share their thoughts and experiences, and also, crucially, to listen to and learn from one another, which, does sometimes involve learning to tolerate some discomfort as well. A second practice that we use to foster spacious learning is integrating relational scaffolding for research and creative projects during scheduled class time. So much of our learning how to do research is assumed by instructors, but conducting research and writing requires skills that go beyond the more obvious skills of critical reading, synthesizing information, and writing well. So it also requires understanding how to find and prioritize the time to conduct research and to write or to create, strategies for getting words on the page, and also balancing the demands of research and creation with the demands of living complex human lives. So what we try to do in our classrooms, and also sometimes in sessions outside of class, is to model what this looks like in our own academic practices, and also providing opportunities for students to practice in class, for example, via free writing, peer review, Pomodoro writing sessions, and getting students to kind of brainstorm and report in with how they're doing with their project progress. Another thing that we integrate is reflective writing, which we find is a really powerful practice for cultivating spaciousness in our teaching and learning. And this resonates strongly with what you were saying earlier, Devin. We integrate reflective writing in a variety of ways, including via a pause at the beginning of class, and also through self-reflective essays towards the end of the trimester. And what we've found is that having this kind of pause at the beginning of class and just integrating it into the rhythms of the course allows students to check in with themselves, to gather their thoughts, to prepare for engagement. Often people are kind of rushing, and it just helps people to kind of center themselves, I guess. We sometimes give students a specific prompt, but we often leave the invitation open-ended so that students are able to use the time in a way that best suits them. And we find that deliberately carving out space for being invites wonder and an emphasis on being and becoming. And encourages students to bring their whole selves to their learning.
And then the final thing we just wanted to share today, and we're really looking forward to the conversation afterwards, is an approach that we've called assessment as pedagogy. So this approach highlights the way that assessment isn't just a way of testing how much a student has learned, but is itself an important form of learning. We think this shift to conceiving of assessment as an integral part of how students learn encourages us to think about assessment differently, because it encourages us to think about learning as a process. We also think this process doesn't happen in the classroom or via readings. I'm sure you're all aware of how much learning actually happens outside the classroom. And we think it's often more meaningful and long-lasting when the student is responsible for connecting what they learn in the course with aspects of their lives and thinking about how best to convey that connection to us. So one of the examples we use of this assessment as pedagogy approach is allowing students to undertake creative projects rather than traditional research essays. We are very, very open-ended about the form these creative projects can take. Students are welcome to make a case for a wide variety of media, which includes visual arts, oral arts, creative writing, and interactive interventions. I will also note that this option is often taken up by Indigenous students, by neurodiverse students, by students who otherwise often feel either unseen or like the academy doesn't really cater to them. So it really does sort of valorize the learning and the experiences that they are already bringing into the classroom with them. We encourage them to work collaboratively in developing their creative projects so that they don't see learning just as this individual thing that they sit in a room on their own writing a research essay. It is something that we do in community. And then alongside their creative project, they do write a critical self-reflection, thinking about the learning that they've done and how that relates to the themes of the course. So we find this to be really, I mean, it's just such a transformative experience, not just for the students, but for ourselves. I think our experience as teachers has been really changed by seeing what students bring to this. And my sense is that this is actually quite responsive to this moment we find ourselves in, where education is seen very much in instrumental ways. And I think AI feeds into that if you see education as instrumental, AI is this tool that allows you to kind of instantly produce something that will get you a grade, that allows you to get the qualification. And so, these creative projects are just so beautiful because students aren't, there's no reason, unless the project is actually about querying AI, which I have had students do, there's not really any reason to use AI because that's not what the point of the assignment is.
Rock on, thank you. And you know what? Now that looking at everything you said holistically and looking at Nancy Wright's question in the chat, I'm going to open up with a question about theory and method. And after that, I do have a question about pedagogy, unless I will prioritize any Q&A questions in the chat. So theory and method, thinking how Devin highlighted non-Western theory, or Janneke is saying getting away from the standard reading list. Like everyone has to read Waltz, everyone has to read, Wendt, everyone, and so on and so on. Or Kate and Claire, your comments got me to thinking about arts-based methodology. And then dovetailing, using the pun twice, with Nancy's comment on other methods besides thinking like hard quantitative analysis for IR. What if it's narrative analysis? Then that got me thinking about Cecilia Lynch's work on interpretive international relations. So I guess broadly speaking, if you want to speak to theory and or method when it comes to the evolution of international relations, is there any methodology that you've leaned into that's maybe outside of what we consider traditional IR, or are there any non-Western theorists that work your leverage? And it can be your own work too. You don't have to cite someone else, you can really cite your own work. So I'll turn over to whoever wants to go first.
I just want to add one small tidbit to the response I put in the chat, which I'm just going to read it super quick just for people who are watching the recording for this later so they have the context here. So I said that I think it's a great question. I'm curious what others think of this, but I do suspect that there is a bit of this relation between method and theory here. My short answer to this is that I think being a bit more open to epistemological approaches makes folks also open to a wider variety of things that are worth engaging as text. And I use text in like a very broad sense here. The other thing that I'll add to this, so I'll give one example. So the week that I assigned the poetry in particular in my fall class last term, what really resonated with students, because I actually asked the reflections of this, because I was like, this is the first time I've assigned poetry for a class. I oftentimes will ask my students for reflections on approaches that we ask in the classroom, because again, similar to Janneke's point, it's like students have dignity, and I'm genuinely interested in what things they think they are benefiting from in the classroom. And a lot of students pointed out that, the two things. One, the concepts were actually much clearer in the poetry than in a lot of the articles that they read, even though poetry takes a kind of lens of interpretation to understand. And they felt like the author was like more to the point. They're like, okay, I got this. Like this concept was actually easier to understand by reading it in poetry, and then I was able to pair it with the academic text, and I really got it that way. But the other thing that I'll mention here too on kind of method is, I think sometimes by privileging approaches or writing or theories that draw really heavily on positivist and quantitative work, and I'll say, like, I do think there's time and place for those things. It's valuable to, I think, bring in a variety of these approaches. I wouldn't myself advocate for having only one approach and not other approaches. I think when you do this, what ends up happening is you do get a very state-centric narrative of the world in IR, and of particular states. What students got out of the poetry pieces of this was a much better understanding of what the everyday implications for like what IR looks like for people's day-to-day lives. And so I think that's one big benefit that we get from being a bit more creative with the methods that we let into our classroom. And even if you are a positivist or somebody who is very quantitative, there's a real benefit, I think, to bringing in these other type of methodological or epistemological approaches, even if you don't agree with them. So.
Yeah, I wish you were all my IR teachers. I love it. I'm very isolated in a very small institution, so it is just amazing to just so deeply resonate with people so far away on the two-dimensional Zoom. I have like two things that two things that have really helped me a lot. On poetry, as Devin mentioned, tomorrow we will read a 1981 poem by Kate Rushin called The Bridge Poem. It's about, well, you'll know what it's about, I'll post a link. But it offers a few ways for which people can express how they've been forced to cross borders in their everyday lives. It gives some language, and it centers that right in the beginning of the semester, so we don't need that as an afterthought. Like Devon said, the poem is short, concise, beautifully crafted. It's from the Bridge Called My Back anthology that we all read way back when. And then I love the writing in community that Kate and Claire talked about. So I tried to be really brave last year, and I read Shira El-Malik's Letter to Baba. It's in, I think, International Studies, and it's a letter written to her father reflecting on racialized violence, and it has all the academic pieces in the footnotes rather than in the main text. It's a beautiful piece. I've been reading that with my students. They're first year students. It's quite a reach, but they really resonate with the life experiences, the pain, the relationship, the effort to try to express yourself to an elder and maybe not getting through. After reading that, we write our own, instead of a midterm, we write our own letters to a loved one or someone we care about, trying to express a concept that we're struggling with or learning about. And honestly, I've learned so much about my students. I've never enjoyed reading a midterm more. And there was zero AI, I could tell you that much. These were handwritten letters people put their heart and soul into. But they also really got to concepts and ideas in a deep way. And I was just so thankful to Shira for writing that piece that we could connect that kind of thing into the classroom. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
In that case, my next question, unless last dibs, anyone? All right, then my next, yeah, Elia opened the shot across about right away. AI, and that's come up pretty much in everyone's kind of comments. And I wrote down several ways of framing it. AI in the classroom, or it could be even just technology in the classroom, like how many times we've lectured and we see just students buried in their phones or their laptops like this. And it got me thinking, maybe the question isn't so much about the perceived challenge, but what we still want the outcome to be. We want our students to be engaged critical thinkers. So in terms of, we could either frame it as, Chat GPT in the classroom, or generating the elephant in the room using Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, or just technology writ large. Just talking about maybe other techniques you've used to engage your students. And I know I was hugging myself inside when Claire and Kate were talking about all these little techniques they use in the class to keep them engaged. So again, I will let you self-identify for discussion.
Yeah, hi. I was just thinking about technology in the classroom and reaching towards particular goals, and thinking about the micro communities that I've learned that I've been using those for a really long time now. And then when COVID hit, all of a sudden we weren't in a room together, and then since then, so we went into Zoom small groups, and that worked quite well. But then after that, there was this need for people to be able to participate remotely, and it really kind of threw a spanner in the works, because I was like, I'm not going to compromise this way that I teach. The relational groups are really important, and so I've actually been able to harness technology to enable people to Zoom into the small groups. So I mean, and this is classroom space dependent, but in some of the classrooms that I've been able to teach in, I've had like pod type setups where I then have a big screen, and those people who are participating remotely are still able to be, they're on a big screen with the people who are in person. And so they're still integrated into those communities, and yeah, they still form those relationships. They're WhatsApping one another, and it was a way of preserving that relational element, so that it wasn't just those people in the class and then other people having a very different experience. There was just a way of kind of bringing them in. So I've gone from being somebody who was very uncomfortable with technology to being really grateful for some of the flexibility that it affords. And I find that that's, yeah, that it's also flexible for people who have to work, for people who are ill, neurodivergent students who, you know, have fluctuating capacity, and sometimes they're able to come to class and be there in person. Other times they're having to be on a screen, or they may just be participating by chat. So I think there's a flexibility that some forms of technology can invite that is really precious.
I can jump in. And it sounds like this is sort of true across all of the people we've heard from, but I think also maybe being really explicit about what it is that we're doing. I mean, so much of what we do, there's sort of the hidden curriculum, both in terms of thinking about methodologies and expectations and disciplinary norms, but also I just think understanding what learning is and what we're doing together. Kate and I both do quite a lot of explicit narration about why we've chosen these particular pieces to share with them, why the assessment looks the way that it does, what we're hoping for in the room. And then we also invite students to, you know, in my very first class, I ask students what they're hoping to learn across the trimester. And so I think, yeah, I kind of see, again, resonances across us, but I think sometimes we just take for granted that we're so familiar with the institution and education or higher education. So maybe just some kind of being quite explicit about what it is that where we stand and what we're trying to do, but then also inviting students to kind of think through that and to share that and to kind of collectively form, not that we all have to agree, but to kind of at least start a conversation about what it is that we're doing here together.
Right.
I just wanted to chime in on the last point that you had made, Claire. I do just a Google survey at the beginning of semesters, and I give it's a very simple thing, but it gives also students an opportunity to tell me a little bit about like whatever they want to share. So to start kind of building that relational aspect. And I've found it to be really helpful. In some cases, I've found out about like other things happening in students' lives that are making learning compete. So we've been able to kind of make adjustments early in the semester versus students feeling like they have to take shortcuts or not show up in the way that they'd fully like to in class. It doesn't have, you know, so even if you're feeling kind of crunched on time and things like that, there's other kind of ways like surveys or whatnot that you can also kind of start building that relationship in kind of low lift ways.
Can I jump in?
Oh, yes, please, absolutely.
Okay, so I was just reflecting on Kate, let me see. No, yeah, Claire's comment on instrumental learning, right? Because it's so interesting, and students as consumers. So I love cooking, and I always make comparisons of my job and cooking. And I think as being in the periphery of the periphery, sometimes it's just interesting that you as a professor, you have to be every time like bringing, you know, students to reality, that we are not here only to learn concepts or only to learn theories or only to learn, you know, I don't know, explanations, but we are here to understand, you know, to develop critical thinking and so on and so forth. And this is really a challenge because sometimes they are really interested in the instrumental part, you know. I mean, I teach international trade. So can you imagine Trump doing all the tariffs and everything? And students were eager to learn this. You know, what are the effects? What about the consumers? What about economics? Because I've heard from my students, teacher, I need to get this knowledge to get a good job. You know, so every time they are kind of pressing, you know, you say, okay, I'm just trying to show here things that humans can do that maybe machines will not be able to do, you know. I hope so. And I think we don't have this challenge of creating communities because, of course, I try in the beginning of the semester also to make them, in small groups and build this. But I think this is kind of naturally when it comes to not to virtual classes. To virtual classes, was really challenging for me. But nowadays, it's almost natural. Students here, they're really supportive, very different from the US environment. I have studied some semesters in the US, and there it was like almost you have, to beg someone to help you. Here it's not like this. Our students, they're very friendly and community, and they supportive. They try to, but this is also a challenge, international students, but they try to uh, uh, receive, I don't know how to say now, but anyways. So I think what is most challenging is bringing this reflexibility like to instrumental classes, especially the first subjects that we have, and trying to show them like, I don't know if you are aware of this pedagogy as encounter from Naim. Yeah, probably. Yeah. So for me, it's always, a challenge to balance this, why you are here, but I know why you are here, and I want to deliver something, some knowledge, but actually let me first bring you to this, why are we learning this, and probably this in 10 years will be over, some new theory will come up, so just let me build something more deeper. So this is really challenging as well for us, I think, at least for me.
Since Amanda's come back on screen, I have a feeling that between her and Lauren and Hannah, we're about to get hooked for time. I know, which is most unfortunate. I mean, this has been a great conversation. It's been great listening to everybody's comments. My only comment is I'm just going to post a book that I referenced earlier on in the talk, and I just didn't want to be disruptive and post it during the Q&A, but it's Analyzing Social Narratives by Cecilia Lynch. I read it over the summer for a project, and I found it. I first felt like an IR heretic reading it, but I was like, wait a minute, but I feel better for having read it. So it was a great book. Anyway, yes, I will turn it back over to Amanda.
Thank you so much, Pigeon. And I just want to thank all of the panelists, as well as Lauren, Hannah, and everyone at ISA HQ for putting this together. I love getting to hear so many different perspectives on what it's like to teach today. I think teaching is a tough thing to do at any time, particularly in our field where things are constantly changing. I think Aaliyah pointed out in the beginning about how hard it is to stay up to date on everything and to add different cases and different perspectives. And then when you layer on top of that all the challenges we face in 2025, I think it's tremendous. And I think that the very community that many of you spoke about in terms of how important it is to develop amongst our students, it's also clearly so vital to develop that amongst ourselves so that we can share ideas and commiserate and encourage, I think is really important. Let me just briefly share some ways, because one of the things that I really love to do is to bring people together and to hear these new perspectives. And if I don't know you, then I may not be able to contact you to join a panel. So if you've been listening to this today and you have perspectives you would like to share on what you're doing in your classrooms or your thoughts on political pedagogy, I want to share a few ways that you can get involved. So first, both Pigeon and I are contributing editors on the Active Learning and Political Science blog. We don't just publish political science, we publish anything kind of related to political learning. So if you have ideas or perspectives, we accept all kinds of different short blog posts. It's a very quick process, so please consider checking out the site and contacting one of us if you have anything to add. I recommend, if you're a member of ISA, to join the Education and Learning section or the Teaching Centered Institution Caucus and keep up with their activities. If you are a member of APSA, the Teaching Learning Conference at APSA workshop, the whole day is great, but I've co-sponsoring with Tavishi Basan at Kennesaw State, the State of the Field of Political Science Education, where we're doing some real work to try to formalize the idea of the political science education or political pedagogy as an actual subfield worthy of studying, so that those of us that didn't get the training in how to teach before we were thrown into the classroom, maybe we can do better for our new early career instructors. If you're going to be attending ISA, the Teaching Day at ISA is great. And then you can always email us at teachingday@isa@gmail.com. If you want to learn more about the Pedagogy Conference Planning Committee's work, if you want to be on a panel, if you have ideas for future virtual panels where we can continue these kinds of conversations, please feel free to contact us. And thank you so much for attending today. And good luck to everyone, with those of you who are starting the semester now, those of you who are well in the middle of it in other parts of the world. Good luck to all of you, and thanks for coming. And thanks again to all of our panelists and to Pigeon for moderating.